Hello, Kentucky. Matt Tackett here to welcome you to this edition of the KAED Netcast. Now, as always, we have a special guest, and today we're going to welcome Josh Tubbs, the President and CEO of Kentucky Lake Economic Development, to the Netcast. Now, Josh and I, we're going to discuss all things economic development. We're going to understand what makes Benton and Marshall County and the Kentucky Lake region such a special and successful place. And we're going to speak to the innovation, the vibrance, and the creativity through which Josh leads and advances economic development in the Kentucky Lake region, which is certainly important locally and has important ramifications across this Commonwealth. So without any further ado, we're happy to welcome to the Netcast, Josh Tubbs, President and CEO of Kentucky Lake Economic Development. So welcome back. As we said, we have an extra special guest here today. Josh Tubbs is President and CEO of Kentucky Lake Economic Development, and he's been gracious with his time here today. So, hey, Josh, thanks for being here, and how are you doing?
Hey, glad to be here, Matt. Thanks for having me with you. Things are going pretty well, just like everyone else, trying to adjust to the recent events. So we're doing good though.
Yeah, a lot of Zoom calls, definitely interesting days, but we're rolling. I feel like we're going to begin to emerge from this, and I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about that. But, there's became an audience that's outside of KAED that's watching this, which we're really grateful for. So because of that, I thought maybe you'd tell us a little bit about yourself for those that don't know you, and how you got into economic development.
Yeah, so, I actually came to the public sector from private foster care. I was a case manager and family recruitment guy for a private foster care agency while I was in grad school. Came out of grad school and got into the public sector by way of grant writing, project administration, those kinds of things at the local level in a planning capacity for my hometown, or home county, Marshall County. So I did that for a couple of years and had the opportunity to work with the economic developer at the time for Marshall County and the Delta Regional Authority on some economic development related grants. Thought that was really interesting and really liked the bricks and mortar part of that concept and that partnership. So shortly thereafter, my predecessor retired, and I put in for the job, and interviewed, went through a pretty lengthy interview process, and yeah, so was offered the job. And it's really special for me, Matt, because I've said this before, I get to do this job in a place that my family's called home for over 9 generations. So it's really really neat to be able to be passionate about a community that you grew up in. And so when we do announce projects, when we do see an expansion, it's just very special to be able to see the people affected by that kind of situation. And when things get tough, it's also extra hard to see your community bounce back from the current situation we have. So that's kind of how I got involved in economic development. This is my 14th year, I believe.
Okay.
So
well,
yeah, hard to believe it's been that long, but
yeah, you don't look old enough for that kind of seniority already. Yeah. But I can see that you're getting the gray a little bit in the beard. I am too, really bad. But as I was listening to you, it reminded me of, we've had so many conversations just as friends about you working in your home community and what that means for you. And I just appreciate that so much, because I'm from Prestonsburg in the eastern part of the state, and sooner or later, one of these days, I hope to, be in a position to affect change and just do good in my hometown. So I've always really appreciated that about you. And you're doing economic development in Benton and Marshall County, right on Kentucky Lake, and just what a place to live, to be from, what a place to do economic development. So talk a little bit about Benton and Marshall County and the Kentucky Lake region and why it's so special.
So Marshall County and really the entire Western Kentucky region is a very special place. I'll start with just logistics. First of all, we have 4 rivers that come together here in West Kentucky. the Ohio, Mississippi, Cumberland, and Tennessee River. So, without a doubt, the marine industry has been especially important to us throughout the region. But because of Kentucky Dam and the construction of that lock, back in the 40s when it came about, and then of course hydroelectricity, the impact that had on my community especially has echoed for generations. And by way of the large chemical industry complex that we have in Calvert City. So very, very interesting place. It's hard to believe that there's that kind of impact in the chemical manufacturing world right here in Marshall County. And really for us, Kentucky Lake has meant that tourism is actually a very large industry for our community during the seasonal months. So, making sure that people are visiting us, that they identify our area, with Kentucky Lake is very important, and it keeps people coming back.
Let me just encourage people: if you've not been to Kentucky Lake, you've got to go check it out. It's one of my favorite places to go, and my wife and I will stay at Kentucky Dam Village, and we'll stay there all weekend, just walk around, and we'll rent a pontoon. It's just a really, really cool place to be. One of my favorite places in Kentucky by far. I think something a lot of Kentuckians, we're sports nuts. Talk about the Hoops Fest and what that means, and just the massive superstars. How many NBA players have came through Marshall County High School?
Yeah, so Hoop Fest has been a really interesting tournament here in Marshall County, hosted at Marshall County High School's gymnasium, and man, you talk about bringing in a lot of folks. We've had some really big names come in for that tournament. Had some big names, Suns play in the tournament as well. So it's a huge draw. It has been over the years, and hopefully it can continue to be as we come out of this whole scenario. But yeah, definitely a big deal for us here in Marshall.
Yeah, we're going to talk about economic development, and that wasn't on the questions that we talked through, but Benton, Kentucky is on the map in the sports world because of that Hoops Fest. And, the gym there too is just known as one of the best gyms in America. So what a cool thing to be in Benton. And, there's so many opportunities and advantages in Kentucky, and definitely where you're doing economic development. And there's such a story to tell there. So I'm curious as to what is your sales pitch or your elevator message when you're out talking to site location consultants or business CEOs?
Well, I tell you, it's really hard to narrow it down to 30 seconds, but I can tell you that we're tremendously blessed to have a workforce with specific skills that have literally built themselves over over the generations. The hard work ethic of our people, the specific skills that are passed down through our trades in the chemical manufacturing, plastics, special metals world is just really second to none. And the ability for our people to learn new technologies, to learn new processes, and to adapt is just tremendous. I'm so thankful that we have that kind of workforce, but also logistically kind of being in the middle of that triangle from St. Louis to Nashville and Memphis is a really interesting place to be, especially in Kentucky, because when we look at the broader picture of the Southeast, we see ourselves in the context of where we're located in that corridor. So being very accessible to Chicago and to New Orleans by both interstate and river and rail in some places. So it's a really interesting place logistically to be. I think that gives us an advantage. I think that gives us an advantage across Kentucky, but also in our little regional area here. When you talk about West Tennessee and southern Missouri and southern Illinois, it's just a really neat place to be.
Yeah, what an advantage for Kentucky, and definitely your area too. What we have in terms of just our geographic blessings. No competitor can manufacture. So, we're within a day's drive of 2/3 of the U.S. population. We have 3 global air shipping hubs. We can put product anywhere in the world overnight. It's just a great advantage for us. And I know you're leveraging that successfully every day. And, this is an economic development networking podcast. And I think we're going to start to ask all of our guests, especially our seasoned and successful ones like you, what your definition of economic development is.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the, at the short, I've always defined economic development as wealth creation. Okay, because there's so many factors in a community at the community level that contribute to the success of economic development as it is. But certainly everything from your entrepreneurs to your small business owners, in our case, our lodging industry, as well as our small, mid-size, heavy manufacturers all contribute to that concept of economic development. So it's hard I'm sure that everyone would agree, it's really hard to put your thumb on one central part of what defines it. We focus, Kentucky Lake Economic Development focuses mainly on the manufacturing world, but we also realize that there's so many other components to economic development. So if I had to say, if I had to give a definition, I would say wealth creation. I mean, it's not just for companies, but for the people in that community. It's their ability to work and to produce and to do that with dignity and to be a part of their community.
Yeah, wealth creation that translates through a community to up the overall quality of life. Because I think about it similarly as you do, as wealth creation that amplifies quality of life. So I'm going to collect all of these and put them out on Twitter or on our website at some point, because I know we're going to get different but equally important answers from everyone as we go through. So you mentioned this a couple of times. There's a great chemical complex in Calvert City in Marshall County. So can you talk about the chemical and the plastics complex and what that means for your community and what that means for Kentucky?
Yeah, so the chemical complex in Calvert City, Kentucky, which is in the northern part of Marshall County and sits on the Tennessee River, really started churning, after the completion of Kentucky Dam, with the advent of hydroelectricity there in that area, mainly because of the cost efficiency of operating, and having these heavy demands for electricity, which continues to be another advantage of being in our neck of the woods, and really across Kentucky is the cost of electricity is a huge factor when it comes to producing. But anyway, so we have approximately 13 chemical manufacturers. Well, I say chemical manufacturers, especially chemical manufacturers, plastics, vinyls, special metals to some extent, there in Calvert City, Kentucky. And really it translates into, somewhere over, directly and indirectly, 3,000 jobs,
wow,
which is huge for a rural community of our size. But certainly it has a strong regional effect as we look at the different counties in West Kentucky. And quite honestly, the nature of these jobs they're very well-paying jobs. These are jobs that folks make careers out of. Folks will come from as far away as Southern Illinois and West Tennessee to work at one of our manufacturers in Calvert City. So it's really an interesting place because of the size and scope of that complex. But we see all kinds of things come out of. I know you've got kids, so you're probably familiar with a manufacturer, 3A Composites. That's where the tiles for the Epcot Center, Spaceship Earth, were manufactured there in Benton. So kind of cool there. But those are the kind of things that we see coming out. Just really interesting stories. And a lot of these specialty chemicals go into a number of, pharmaceuticals or cosmetics. whatever the case might be. So paints and those kinds of things. So it's a really interesting complex for sure.
You know, one of the early days in my KAED timeline, you invited me down to the area, and we were there a couple of days and just had such a great time. But the first time you took me through the complex, it was just really eye-opening to see the scale of the industry that exists there. So what a blessing. And I know that you're taking very good care of them in normal times through your retention and expansion efforts, and definitely now. And we'll talk about that. But before we do, I think it'll be really cool for our audience to learn a little bit about Kentucky Lake economic development. And there's a really fascinating story and some transitions that you've led recently, and would love to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so historically in our community, as with a lot of smaller communities, I'm sure our economic development efforts were really led by the public sector. The Marshall County Fiscal Court really took on the role of funding and leading, kind of the path of economic development in Marshall County. And so what we did is collaboratively with the private sector as well as the public sector is, we focused our intentions on creating a nonprofit economic development organization that's primarily funded by the private sector partners that we have. And we know that that's more effective. History has shown us in communities that begins and that is successful, that you're more effective in economic development. And so we're in that transitional phase, and I think it's going to take us time, but nevertheless, we're kind of staying the course. And hopefully, as we continue to develop that organization and talk about that organization's mission, we're able to bring in more partners to fund our economic development efforts, so that we can begin to build our business retention and expansion efforts, and we can continue to build our marketing efforts and those kinds of things. And while we certainly appreciate that the public sector partners are vitally important to what we do, we find it meaningful that we get that buy-in from the private sector, and we get direction from the individuals that are in the business of business. So,
yeah, in a short amount of time, you've reimagined economic development there. You've went through a great rebrand. The stuff that you all put out looks incredible. I encourage everyone to visit your website that you've recently launched too. What's the address that they can?
You can find us at KLEDC.com, and that's our website. Yeah, and you mentioned the branding. We actually participated with a larger community effort years ago in really rebranding or branding our community, and we all found that the common thing that we had was Kentucky Lake. And so I found that when I was, especially in the Southeast or wherever the case might be, talking about Marshall County, you could really be in Marshall County, Tennessee, Marshall County, Mississippi. There's a lot of Marshall County. So by branding ourselves as Kentucky Lake, we're taking ownership of that. And certainly there are other counties here that take advantage of the lake, but we wanted to associate ourselves with that. I think it really helps folks identify with where we are in Kentucky, especially. But that was a bigger collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce here, our Tourism and Conventions Bureau, and economic development, as well as our public sector partners. So that was a really interesting thing. And I got to tell you, beyond that, what was most important for us was having a product to put in front of companies. And I know that we may be leading into another question, but without product development and without the ability to put a site in front of a company or a site selector, you can really do all kinds of things creatively, but unless you've got a good product, it's really not going to make much of a difference. And so it was very exciting when we rolled out our first industrial park, multi-tenant industrial park here in Marshall County. Southwest One Industrial Park. That was really the product of a lot of strategic planning and educational components across, the elected official spectrum, and it was really meaningful for us because it catapulted us into, okay, now we've got the product, we got to do this right. We need those private sector partners to help push this along.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I did have a question on my list about Southwest One because you're right. There's so many different aspects of economic development, but you've got to have that product there, and it's got to be ready for quick, risk-free decisions, because the timing of what you do is just so critical. And Southwest One is an incredible industrial park, and we're familiar with it, and our consultants are just really excited to see what the future holds for an area that is important to me and an area that you're passionate about is your hometown. So what you've done there is incredible with the Southwest One. And I want to jump back to your organization. You talk about the importance of the private sector, and you're bringing on private sector partners and investors, and they're bought in. They've came together to support you. And talk about how you were able to build such a great collaborative network of community supporters, and why that's meaningful for you.
Yeah, so we try to be very intentional about what our purpose is through our organization. We tried to be very pointed with the direction that we want to, initially steer the organization by being that, marketing partnership for the assets that we have in our community, right? So it would be easy for us to just look at a broad spectrum of economic development related stuff and say, we're going to do entrepreneurship, we're going to do small business stuff, we're going to do business retention expansion, and we're going to do recruitment. But what we decided was, from the very beginning, okay, the most important thing to us is obviously making sure that our existing industry are happy and that they know who they can reach out to should there be questions, issues, or hopefully the likelihood of expansion. So making sure that our existing industry know that they can call on us at any time to sometimes just fill the gap, just to point them in the right direction who they talk with. So that's number one. Number two, making sure that our partners see us as that, that marketing entity for job creation, for projects that may be looking. It also gives us, having a measurable goal as far as, being able to at the end of the year talk about the projects that have looked at your community. Talk about how many RFIs you're getting or you're sending back, and those kinds of things. That's very important for, my partners to see that. I want them to understand that we're not just kind of throwing it up and seeing what happens, that we're actually measuring what we're doing. Hopefully we're putting something in place, and I think we are. I think the foundation for what we like, this is our second year of Kentucky Lake Economic Development. So very young organization, but I think that what we're doing is we're establishing an organization that will transcend hopefully much longer after I'm gone, because we need that. We need that consistency, and I think any community needs that consistency. I think if you look at your more successful economic development agencies or organizations in any community, that consistency is very important. So I think that's what we've built, and I'm pretty optimistic that with that we'll bring on more partners, that will get their buy-in, will get their direction, because these are smart folks and these are great partners, that really and truly want to see our community grow. They want to see our community thrive. They want to see more people moving into our community, our population getting bigger, and so having passionate partners has been very important to our success thus far, and I'm really excited about what that looks like in the years to come.
Yeah, me too. And it's been really fun, and I don't have a better word to say. It's just been really cool to watch you blazing this trail in real time in Marshall County. So it's I've learned a lot from you and your approach and what you built there, and the mark that you're going to leave on your community, and you're right, is going to last well beyond us. So, yeah, and you talk about being a resource and an asset, and we're in uncertain, odd times with COVID. And I know the great job that you've done in nurturing and being there for your existing industry throughout this COVID phase. And you and I have talked several times. I know you've been a really strong advocate for Marshall County here in Frankfort. And you're one of the ones that I think you and I have probably spoken up there the most out of everybody in our association. So I know the hard work that you're putting in. And can you talk about how you've been kind of mitigating through the COVID situation, and maybe how the communities came together too throughout these days?
Yeah, I can. I think that the biggest thing that we could do in the beginning was to make sure that the concerns of our existing industries were hopefully heard by our elected officials. I think the biggest concern we had was, what's the next order going to look like? Because nobody really knows. I mean, we're being right. This whole thing has been very reactionary from a community's standpoint, and certainly we've had great leadership at the local level, and everybody's been in their wheelhouse. So making sure that we were identifying what the problem was, coming up with a solution, not necessarily the solution, over communicating that, and you really can't do that, right? So but making sure that we were constantly just beginning that process over and over and over with every industry that was reaching out to us and saying, hey, this is a concern that we have. Now, we had some industries that didn't have an issue, and that's okay. But I'm very confident that they know that they could have reached out to us because of the communication we were offering. And to be honest with you, once we kind of got into like the second, third week of this, I was getting email blasts from everywhere, right? I mean, every association and every group was sending out COVID-19 resources. And I stepped back, I said, okay, maybe I'm sending out too much stuff to these guys. So we tried to tailor our communication down and make sure that we were hitting the folks that really wanted to see it. And I think we did a good job. But I think that we did a good job because our manufacturers in our existing industry cared. They truly wanted our elected officials at the community level, at the state level, to know that they were taking the necessary measures that they could to keep their people healthy and safe, and to also make sure that they were doing their part to keep the community healthy and safe. And I just really, really appreciate it, and saw some great stories come out of that. So there's that. One of the other things that we've done as we're coming out of this, in this reopening phase, myself and economic development, our tourism folks, and our Chamber of Commerce, as well as some other partners in the respective cities and county, have come together with this Team Kentucky Like concept. And I guess sometimes I take for granted the impact that social media has. But what I've learned is that at a local level, that utilizing social media, especially in times like this, can really help rebuild and instill a lot of hope and optimism in your community. So we've come together and we partnered together to fund a small grant program for our very small business owners who are needing assistance with some things. But I think, beyond that, Team Kentucky Like concept will be what brings us together more as partners across the board. And I'm excited to see how that unfolds. So just like after the Great Recession, obviously this is very, very much different, but just like after that, we're absorbing everything that we can to figure out how we can make best use of our resources after this is over with, and to make sure that we're being that much more competitive in site selection and making sure that we're getting our product out there. And I think what's really great about, KAED is that I learn from my colleagues in other areas, and I learn how they're doing these things. And there's some really creative ways that I think we're going to see communities bounce back from this.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think your community needs to be commended for the team Kentucky Lake, because I've seen so many videos and so many messages of positivity, which I think is important, that are kind of manifesting from Marshall County. So I think that's been a powerful thing. And I know there's power in something that people can all kind of identify as and work collectively within. So Team Kentucky Lake, the hashtag is definitely on fire on social media. And, I think to your point on just being kind of a resource that has digested the overwhelming amount of material and emails that are coming in, and saying, here's what you need to know, and here is the facts, the actual facts, because there's definitely been a lot of emails and no shortages of webinars and KAEDs. Part of that, we've sent out a million, but there's been so much going out that it is just almost overwhelming. And some of it, this is reactionary, and we're all trying to get information out as quickly as I can. But I think there's been some confusion probably because of that. So the fact that you're kind of curating that and making it available for your industry is just so important right now. And I think about just, aside from listening to some of the best practices that you implement and that others may share throughout these series of netcasts, what would be kind of just a couple, 1 or 2 or 3 points that you would think any community would need to be considering to best kind of position themselves post-COVID?
Yeah, well, I mean, the jury's kind of still out. I would say, number one, over communication is key, and I think that it goes beyond just a email blast every once in a while. I think you got to reach out, you got to have conversations. I know in my case, I was able to actually talk with some corporate folks that I had not talked to before because of this unique situation. But that's another contact that I have for our existing industry that I think helps build that relationship internally with our companies. So over communication for certain. I think being an advocate for not just your companies, but for your community is really important in times like this, because, we were actually out yesterday visiting a small kind of destination tourism place called the Hitchin Post in a community in Aurora, which is on Kentucky Lake. The southern part of our county on Kentucky Lake is a really interesting country store concept and just a very cool place. Okay. But the owner made a really interesting, she said, I'm eager to see how this affects us when, the country has unplugged and then we're plugging back in again. And I think that what she was saying was, hopefully our local people will see just how important our local industries and companies and businesses are, from the restaurants all the way up. So I think that's another important factor. I would also say that, understanding supply chains for existing industry is probably one of the things that I'm really, focused on and zeroed in right now. Not just for your area, but I mean, my gosh, what's happened nationally is something that we should all be paying attention to, and how we bring manufacturing back to this country, back to America, I hope that we have the same fervor for shopping, American-made products that we do for the shopping local initiatives, and I think that we will. But man, we learned a lot about how reliant we are on foreign supply chains, and that was a huge, big interruption here in Kentucky for us.
You're spot on supply chain, and I know for KAED, we're focusing heavily right now on business retention and expansion. So Kentucky's been really aggressive on the business recruitment side of the world, and KAED's played a big part in that. But BR&E, is always where you get the best bang for your buck. So it's crucial in normal times. Now going forward, it is the most crucial element, and we're focusing a lot on that. And I appreciate your take on what communities need to be thinking about, and we'll have this online, and I'll type up your responses too, yours and some others, and we'll make those available in kind of a catalog way. So aside from talking about what's special about Benton and Marshall County and Kentucky Lake and learning about your organization, these netcasts are about kind of networking, bringing us all together and learning and getting to know each other a little bit better. So these are the toughies. You're on the hot seat for our rapid fire questions. So what is your favorite bourbon?
Anything from Buffalo Trace.
Okay.
Right now.
Okay. Who's your favorite musician or band?
Right now?
Yeah.
Lucas Nelson and his band had just came out with a new album. Lucas Nelson and the Promise of the Real is yeah. So right now that's where I'm at. Okay. By way of Willie Nelson. So. Okay.
I saw Willie Nelson in Kentucky a couple of years back. He's still going strong. He's put out a million different albums, but I like Willie Nelson too. Favorite place to eat in Marshall County?
Oh, boy, that is. Man, lots of good barbecue places here. I'm going to go with this one because, I don't know.
These are tough.
I love cheeseburgers, so I'm going to give you two. Okay.
I know where you're going with this.
If you ever come to our community and you've come to visit Kentucky Lake, we still have a classic drive-in in Calvert City, big screen. The only thing cooler than being at the Calvert City drive-in is getting one of their cheeseburgers. It's hard to beat. However, with that said, Blues in the little community of Aurora on Kentucky Lake is a fantastic, people wait 2 hours to get food there. Their burgers are incredible. They have been for years, decades. So I'm going to go with those two just because I like cheeseburgers like that. So. Yeah,
I thought you would suggest that burger place. Man, you're right. That place is great. I'll try to go there in the summertime every time I'm there, but I'll get in trouble for saying this. That might be the best burger in Kentucky.
It's awesome.
Other than Billy Ray's in Prestonsburg, Kentucky, where I'm from.
Oh, yeah.
Gosh, that's a good – I thought you'd go there.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite movie?
Oh, I'm gonna say Giant with James Dean.
Okay.
I think it was his last movie. Really cool movie about an oil baron in West Texas. Giant.
We'll have to look that one up.
Yeah.
Okay. And last one? What's your favorite hobby? Something that takes up your time when you're not doing economic development.
Man, I got so many hobbies. Playing music, writing songs, I make soap, a garden, anything outside. But most importantly, being with my kids and being with my family. We have a good time. I've got a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old, and we just we have a good time together.
Yeah, you've got an amazing family. But I knew you were a musician too. One of these days we'll have Josh hopefully playing a little bit for us at one of our conferences. We've talked about that. I don't know if we can afford you though.
Probably, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, this is
on demand,
We'll get it one of these days. This has been a lot of fun. This is one of the early ones. I think we've had some glitches, but that just kind of adds to the character and makes these fun. But I appreciate your time. And is there anything else you'd like to say before we part?
No, I don't think so. I would just encourage everyone to, stay the course, try to be optimistic with your community, and look for creative ways to overcome this. And I think together we'll all learn a lot from each other, and it'll make us stronger in our counties and our regions, and certainly as a state. So let's just keep rolling. So Thanks, Matt, for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. This too will pass, and Kentucky will emerge strong because we have people like you working on our behalf from all across this Commonwealth, from Harlan to Hickman, I like to say. So just appreciate your time today, Josh.